Hi there guys, and welcome to another video. Now in this video we're going to be installing and using a great network tool called IPerf. Sounds interesting? Then let's get started. Hi there guys, so here we are with another tutorial, and in this video we're going to be taking a quick look at a really useful tool called IPerf. Hey, what? No, listen, I said IPerf, not IPerf.
I'm not a pervert, I just was looking for the network.
Yeah, so as Arnold says, it's not any weird iOS pervert app, it's IPerf and it's all about the network. So IPerf is a great tool that's used to measure network throughput. It runs in a client-server fashion and is available for a multitude of OSs, being truly cross-platform. So in this video we're going to do a few things. We'll start off at looking how to install it on Unraid, Windows, macOS and Linux. After we've seen how to install it, we're then going to go through some tests, and these tests will be run on the different OSs, so you can also see how to use the tool on each. So the first test will be testing network performance between two Unraid servers over a 10 gigabit Ethernet network. And then we'll do a similar test between two Unraid servers, but using standard gigabit Ethernet. Next we'll look at network performance over Wi-Fi using a laptop running Linux. Then we'll take a look at some IPerf results that were obtained using different types of Cat5 network cable. Then we're going to look at the network performance between VMs and the host they're running on. We'll run some tests using the various types of virtual network adapters used in VMs. That will be VirtIO, Virtual Intel and VMXNet 3. Then finally, we're going to finish off by testing the network performance over OpenVPN and WireGuard networks. Okay, so that's the introduction out of the way. Arnold, do you want to bring us into the main video?
It's showtime.
Okay, so let's look at installing IPerf on an Unraid server. And to do that, we're going to need to install something called the Nerd pack. So for that we need to go to the Apps tab, and let's just type in Nerd. And then here we have the Nerd pack here, so let's install that by clicking on the downward arrow. Now once that's done, we can go across to settings, and now under user preferences we can see Nerd pack. So click onto that, and then this shows us a whole list of packages that we can install on the server. So the easiest thing to do is just to type in IPerf into the search box and toggle this switch on the right here from off onto on. And then once you've done that, click apply and then done. Okay, so now IPerf is installed on this Unraid server. And to use IPerf, it's always run from the command line. So on Unraid, we'd open up a terminal window and run the necessary commands from here. We're not going to do that now, that's later on in the video. This part of the video here was just to show how to install the files we need onto Unraid. Now next, let's install the same software but on Windows. So go across to Google and do a search for IPerf 3. Then here we want to click on download IPerf binaries. And here we've got two lots of binaries for Windows. We've got ones for Windows 64-bit and 32-bit versions. I'm running Windows 64-bit, so I'm going to download the latest one here, IPerf 3.13. Okay, so when that's downloaded, go to the folder that you downloaded it into, and then just unzip the file. And so let's go into this folder here, and inside this folder we'll find the IPerf binary. Now I'm going to rename this just to IPerf 3, and I'm going to cut this folder and go to this PC, and I'm going to put it into the root of my C drive. And the reason I've done this is because IPerf always needs to be run from command line. So by putting it into the root of the C, when I open a command prompt, it's much easier to get to that binary. So once in the terminal window, all I have to do is change directory to that directory by typing cd /IPerf 3. And then once we're inside of the directory, we can run IPerf 3. But we'll be doing that later on in the video, because this part is just how to install everything we need in order to run it on Windows. Okay, so let's install IPerf on the Mac operating system. So we're going to have to download it from the website. So let's open up a browser and do a search for IPerf. And let's go to the IPerf website, click on download IPerf binaries, and now let's scroll down until we find the Apple macOS. And I'm going to download IPerf 3.13 from here. And I'm going to save this file onto the desktop. Okay, so with that done, let's go to the desktop and unzip this file. And here we have the IPerf binary. So I'm going to delete the original file here. Okay, so now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to double click this file just to open it, because when I do that it will come up with a security warning saying that this file can't be opened. And it's just an easy way to set the permissions to allow us to use this file. So click onto OK, so then go to System Preferences, Security and Privacy, and then click here Open Anyway. Another pop-up window is going to come up, so just click onto Open on that, and it just opens up the file. That process has now made this file executable, so we can close these windows now. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to move this file into a location where it can be accessed directly from the terminal. The easiest way to move the file is using command line, so open up a terminal window and type sudo space mv space, then drag this file down here into the terminal window and that'll put in its location. So now put in a space. Now we want to move this file into the bin folder, because macOS Terminal, when you type in a command, it always looks in the bin and the SBin folders first. So if you move it into the bin folder, then we can execute it straight from terminal. So to do that, we just put in the location /bin and then just hit enter. Because we've run it as sudo, it's going to ask for the password, so just pop that in, and that file's now been moved. So now I should be able to run an IPerf command from here. So I'm just going to type in IPerf 3 just to check it and hit enter. And there we are. The command's working straight from within terminal. And we'll use IPerf in macOS later on when we're running one of our examples. But for now this is just how to install it. And now let's move on and have a look at how to install IPerf on a Linux system. So it's super easy to install on a Linux based system. And I'm installing on Elementary OS, which is Ubuntu based. So we're going to open up a terminal window. And all we need to do is to type sudo space apt-get space install space IPerf 3. Then we just need to pop in the password and it will pull down everything needed. When prompted, just click yes to continue. And that's it, job done. IPerf is installed and ready to use. Okay, so that's the end of the first bit of the video where we just see how to install on the various different systems. So now it's time we move on and see it in action. I'm going to run some tests and I'm going to be running them on Unraid, Windows, macOS and Linux, so we'll see examples of using it on all systems. Okay, so now we've got IPerf installed, let's run some tests on Unraid. Now I've got 3 Unraid servers on my local network, this backup server here, which has a standard gigabit Ethernet adapter inside, but I've also got my virtualization server here and my main Unraid server here. Now the main Unraid server and the virtualization server, these both have 10 gigabit Ethernet adapters inside. So the transfer speed between these two servers will obviously be a lot more than the transfer speed to and from my backup server with the standard gigabit Ethernet adapter. Anyway, so let's run IPerf 3 on the backup server, and to do that I'm going to open a terminal window, and in here I'm going to type the command IPerf 3 space -s. Now the -s makes IPerf run in server mode, so I'm just going to click enter, and we can see here it says server is listening on port 5201. So now I'm going to go across to one of the other servers, and this terminal window here is still from the other server, and I'm going to open a new terminal window from this server, and on this server I'm going to run the command IPerf 3 space -c to run it connecting as a client, and then put a space, and then I need to put the IP address of this server here. So for me that's 10.10.20.197, and I'm just going to hit enter. Okay, great, so there we can see the results. So we can see here it's transferred just over a gig of data, and the bandwidth I'm getting 939 megabits per second. So that's a really good speed over my gigabit Ethernet. Okay, so now we can close these two windows. Now I'm going to go across to my main server, and I'm going to run IPerf on my main server, again in server mode. Now remember, this server's got a 10 gigabit Ethernet adapter, So now I'm going to go across to the other server, which also has a 10 gigabit Ethernet adapter, and open the terminal window. And then again, I'm going to run IPerf 3 space -c to connect as a client. And then I'm going to type in the IP address of the main server here. So that's 10.10.20.199. And I'm going to hit enter. Okay, so on my 10 gigabit Ethernet connection, it's transferred around 7 gigs there, and the bandwidth is 5.99 gigabits per second. So I'm not getting full 10 gigabit Ethernet speeds. I would have expected it to be a little bit faster. So that's the really great thing about IPerf. We can use it to kind of diagnose problems, make little tweaks, test again, and see if things have improved. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change the MTU size on the network adapters between these two servers. And what is MTU? Well, MTU is short for Maximum Transmission Unit, which in basic terms just defines the maximum packet or frame size that's allowed over an interface. And the MTU, it's set in bytes. Now by default, the default size of MTU over Ethernet is set to 1500 bytes, so anything larger than this is technically considered a jumbo frame. But the generally accepted size for a jumbo frame is 9000 bytes, and that's what I'm going to be setting the network interfaces to be between these two servers. But in order to make network changes, I need to shut down the VM manager and the Docker service. So I'm going to do that, change this, and come back. Okay, so now the MTU is set to 9000 on both servers. So now let's run the same test again and see if we get an improvement. Okay, so there's the server running, and so now let's connect to it. Okay, so straight away I can see I'm getting much better performance now. I've transferred just over 10 gigabytes at a bandwidth of 8.89 gigabits per second, so that's much better. Okay, so far we've tested network throughput over gigabit and 10 gigabit Ethernet. So how about Wi-Fi? Well, let's test that on my old X1 Carbon running Linux. So let's open up terminal. Now I've already got IPerf running in server mode on another machine on the network, so I'm just going to connect to that using IPerf 3 -c and then the IP address. As expected, it's slower than the wired network, so 279 megabytes have been transferred at a bandwidth of 234 megabits per second. Okay, so something in the results here that we haven't seen so far, and that's this RETR number of 33. This is the number of TCP retransmissions that have occurred during the test. So this is caused by corruption or congestion on the network when things aren't getting through properly, and the packets have to be resent. Now, it's not happening very much in this test, so I'm not really worried about it. But if you do have a lot of network retransmissions, then you're probably going to find you're going to have quite a lot of latency on the network. So what can cause these type of network conditions that cause problems? Well, congestion is obviously just a lot of traffic on the network, so there's not really a great deal we can actually do about that. But you may find some network problems are caused basically just by bad wiring. Just bad Cat5 going between the two computers. Now, the other day at work I saw a computer that was really having bad network connectivity. So I ran IPerf to see what type of throughput that we were getting. And in that first test, the bandwidth was only 22.6 megabits per second. So that was really terrible. So just what could be causing that? Well, on having looked at the computer, I found that the computer was connected to the switch using a power line connector. So normally power line converters are pretty good, but this computer is located in a factory where they've got a lot of electrical machinery. So there's probably a whole bunch of noise and interference in the electricity system, which is causing these really poor results. So next I asked the guys if they had any long Cat5 cables. Someone found one, but to be honest it looked like it was about 100 years old. And the cable was obviously just plain Cat5, because the speeds I was getting was 93.8 megabits per second. Yeah, still around 4 times faster than before, but still not half as good as we could have. So anyway, after about half an hour of rummaging through cupboards and boxes, we did finally find a long Cat5e cable. And testing again with IPerf, we got decent results. So as you can see, IPerf is a really useful tool for diagnosing issues on physical networks. But we can also use it to test virtual networks as well. We can use it to test the speed between a VM and its host, and we can use it to test things such as OpenVPN and WireGuard networks. So now let's have a look at testing the speed between a Windows VM and its host, an Unraid server. Because a lot of people worry when they're running a VM and they map a network drive across to a share on their server that it's going to be slow and limited to the speed of their network adapter. So let's see if that's true. So the default network adapter type when you're using a VM with Unraid is the VirtIO network adapter, and that's what's running in this Windows VM. And the network adapter in the Unraid host server is a standard gigabit Ethernet adapter. Okay, so let's open a browser and go onto the Unraid web UI and run IPerf in server mode there. So now let's bring up a command prompt so we can connect to the server from Windows. And on Windows we need to run IPerf from the directory in which IPerf resides. So here I'm changing directory into the directory IPerf3. Then on Windows it's exactly the same, except we type iperf3.exe. And then the commands that come after it are exactly the same. So to put it into client mode I need to type -c and then the IP address of the server, which is 10.10.20.197. Okay, so look at that. On the network between the VM and the server, I'm getting a bandwidth of 5.42 gigabits per second. So that's really good. Much faster than standard gigabit Ethernet. So over a VirtIO network, the speed is really good. And it isn't dependent on the speed of the host adapter on the server. Okay, so now let's test a different type of virtual network adapter. I'm going to go onto my main Unraid server, and I'm going to go to the VMs tab here, and this is the VM that I'm recording this video on, this macOS VM here. So if I go to edit here, you can see here that I'm using a virtual Intel adapter on this VM. Now I'm expecting this to be much slower than the VirtIO adapter, so let's check it now. So again I'm going to run the IPerf server on Unraid, and I'm going to open up a terminal window in OS X and run IPerf3 in client mode. And now we can see that's a lot slower than with the VirtIO adapter. We're getting gigabit Ethernet speeds with the virtual Intel. Okay, so let's see if I can improve the speed of the network on this Mac VM. Now as you can see here now, I've changed the type of the virtual network adapter to VMXNet3. So let's run that exact same test again and see if there's any difference in performance. And yes, there is. It's a little bit faster than the virtual Intel NIC. I'm getting a bandwidth here of 1.38 gigabits per second, but it's absolutely no contender to the king of virtual network adapters, the VirtIO adapter. Okay, so now let's move on and finish off this video and do a test over a VPN network. And I don't mean a commercial VPN, I mean a VPN that connects to another server, and I'm going to use OpenVPN and WireGuard and compare the two. And I'm going to be connecting to one of Stefan's servers over at SPX Labs. Make sure you check out his YouTube channel and I'll leave the link for that in the description. And he's just moved, so his server's now in Georgia.
Georgia? Why?
Well, the valley's become prohibitively expensive. But if we move to Georgia, we can save a fortune and get a further investment.
Okay, so here we have the test running from Bristol, UK to Atlanta, Georgia. My ISP upload speed isn't the best ever. My speed is 40 up and 500 down, but in this test I'm getting 16.5 megabits per second. And after running the test a few times, I seem to average around sending data up at about 20 megabits per second. So now let's compare that to running the same test but using a WireGuard VPN connection to the same server. Now remember, this test, it isn't very scientific, it's just a rough kind of test just to see what things are like. So many things can affect the network speed between me here in the UK and the USA. But the test over WireGuard, it did seem a lot quicker. I seem to average with a few tests getting about 35 megabits per second. So anyway, this video isn't really about just the results, it's really just to show how to test various things and what you can use IPerf for. It's really quite a useful tool. Well, this video seems to have gone on for far too long already. When I first started making it, I thought it was just going to be a 2-minute tips video. So if you're still awake and you made it to the end, and if you like the video, then please hit up that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. To all of my Patreons and supporters out there, a massive thank you to you guys. It's you guys that make it possible for me to do these videos, so thank you very much. Okay, so it's time for me to go, so I'm going to leave you all to it, but wherever you're up to for the rest of the day, I hope it's good and I'll catch you in the next video.